Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Israel's campaign of aggression has recently taken many forms, including targeted killings and mortar shelling. What does Israel intend to accomplish by that?
أولا بالدرجة الأولى كما ذكرت وهي عملية عقاب جماعي.
First and foremost, the Israeli occupation forces are trying to punish collectively the Palestinian people in the north and the east of the Gaza Strip. Israeli warplanes have targeted deliberately local residents' houses and property.
أيضا الخطة التي تحدثت عنها إسرائيل وهي خطة السهم الجنوبي هي عملية تنفيذ لهذه الخطة وبعدين فشلت هذه الخطة في
This recent Israeli aggression is part of the so-called Operation Northern Arrow, which intended to stop rocket launching from the Palestinian territories into the Green Zone. This Israeli escalation and campaign of targeted killing and shelling proves that Tel Aviv was thrown out of balance after its new government had ascended to power.
لهذه الحالة التي بعد أن أعلنت وقفها لكافة الاتصالات مع السلطة الفلسطينية هذا التخبط الواضح يظهر جليا في عمليات القصف المتواصلة بالإضافة إلى التحليق المستمر لطائرات الاف-16 والطائرات.
The new Israeli government had previously announced that it had suspended all contacts with the Palestinian Authority. The Israeli occupation forces continue to carry out airstrikes and deploy helicopters and surveillance warplanes over the Gaza Strip. In doing so, Israel intends to mount pressure on the Hamas-led government in order to force it to recognize the Jewish state and accept its preconditions. This is part of Israel's attempt to bring the new Hamas government to its knees.
هذا كله يندرج تحت إطار المحاولات الإسرائيلية.
As you can see, many of the wounded were children. These images are indeed very depressing. These victims were injured in a missile attack in the northern Gaza Strip. In addition, a female victim was also martyred in this recent attack.
نعم إذا ما عدنا إلى عملية القصف هي العملية ربما أن القذائف كانت تسقط قبل ذلك أو في أيام سابقة كانت تسقط في مناطق مفتوحة.
In the past, Israel used to launch airstrikes and artillery shells into open and unpopulated areas. However, in the past 5 days, it has directly and intentionally targeted residential areas and the position of the Palestinian National Security Forces. In fact, Tel Aviv previously announced that it will target residential areas and the positions of the Palestinian Authority. This proves once again that the new Israeli government was thrown out of balance. Israel is trying to mount pressure on the new Hamas-led government in order to achieve its objectives and demands.
والمحاولات التي تحاول من خلالها إسرائيل بالضغط على الحكومة الفلسطينية الجديدة لفرض إلاءاتها وشروطها على هذه الحكومة.
Financial problems for the cash-strapped Hamas-led Palestinian Authority are about to get worse. European Union foreign ministers gathered in Luxembourg today to approve a recommendation that direct aid to the PA be suspended. The EU body said it would continue to provide humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people, but the EU rejected charges by Hamas that cutting funds to the government was blackmail. The European Union has steadfastly demanded that Hamas renounce violence, recognize Israel's right to exist, and honor previous PA agreements. The EU action follows similar steps taken by Norway, Canada, and the United States.
We regret that there is no detectable response from that side to our policy principles that we have clearly and consistently been outlining and presenting to the new government, to Hamas.
If you ask me, I think that we should keep some sort of line of communication open because, you know, it's a government and it's been democratically elected.
I will indeed inform the foreign ministers today that I, as a precautionary measure, put all those payments that are going to the Palestinian government and through the Palestinian government and the ministries on hold. But at the same time, of course, we will want to stand by the Palestinian people, as we always said, and we want to help them with their basic needs. That means water, electricity, that means maybe education, that means food aid. And we will also want to support President Mahmoud Abbas, especially in his office.
In Gaza, an angry protest against the impending European Union decision to suspend aid to the Hamas-run Palestinian Authority. Protesters shouted anti-Western slogans and some threw eggs at the local headquarters of the United Nations. Palestinian legislator Saeb Erekat said that the cutoff in aid will make the dire economic straits that much worse.
We urge the American administration to do whatever it takes to ensure that we don't face a human catastrophe due to the situation, the dire financial situation we're facing, and concerning the Israeli military escalations in the recent days, which led to the killing of more than 18 Palestinians in 3 days.
The government announced last night its decision to close the liaison office in Jericho, used jointly by Israeli and Palestinian security personnel. The IDF ordered the PA security men to evacuate the offices, which are located adjacent to the settlement of Vered Jericho. Israel says that contacts will be initiated only if lives are in danger. The decision to close the office was taken by the Security Cabinet. At that same meeting, it was also decided that Israel would act to undermine Hamas's authority as the reigning force in the Palestinian Authority. Palestinian terrorists today continued firing Qassam rockets into Israel. 2 Qassams were fired from the northern Gaza Strip. 1 rocket landed near a fence surrounding the Zakim military base near Ashkelon. The missile fell only a few dozen meters from the base's infirmary. No injuries were reported. The second rocket fell into the sea. Israeli artillery responded from the air and the sea by targeting rocket launching sites. The Palestinians say that 2 people were injured and several buildings were damaged in the response.
The Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called on the United States to put an end to Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people. Palestinian chief negotiator Saeb Erekat confirmed that Mr. Abbas stands against Israeli pressure on the new Hamas-led government. In another development, Jabir al-Akhras, the leader of the Salah ad-Din brigades, the military wing of the Popular Resistance Committees, was killed in clashes with units of the Israeli military forces near the town of Bethlehem.
The Israeli Occupation Authority began to implement its unilateral plan of isolating the Palestinian people. It closed off the West Bank and transferred Palestinian tax revenues to Israeli financial institutions. Meanwhile, the Israeli designated Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, confirmed that his country has suspended contact with the Palestinian president in light of Hamas's victory.
We demand that the Israeli government stop this aggression, which has been escalating day after day. Israel is trying to isolate the Palestinian people. We will do everything in our capacity to come out of this isolation.
Amidst the new wave of aggression, the Occupation Authority has suspended all contact with the Palestinian Authority. Moreover, it has closed its joint military and security office in the town of Jericho and kicked out Palestinian security personnel there. The Palestinian president discussed recent developments with the American consul, who voiced his government's position, confirming that Washington will continue its dialogue with Abbas, but it will not hold talks with the new Hamas-led government.
Since the morning, the Palestinian president has been talking with world leaders to end the crisis. The situation is very critical. We will take all necessary measures to spare the Palestinian people the danger of a human catastrophe.
The Palestinian youth staged a number of demonstrations in front of UN offices, protesting the European decision to suspend financial aid to the Palestinians.
There is only one solution to this crisis. Palestinians must open a comprehensive channel of national dialogue.
The Israeli occupation forces continue to launch random attacks in Gaza, injuring 2 civilians. Moreover, local residents in the town of Bethlehem held a funeral procession for a Palestinian youth assassinated by an Israeli hit squad. The Israeli occupation government left one channel of communication open, that is, military escalation against the Palestinians. The Palestinian people stressed that they will resist this isolation.
المئات من نشطاء الحركة الإسلامية وأهالي مدينة القدس.
Hundreds of Muslim activists in Jerusalem started a cleaning and renovating campaign in the Islamic Minila gravesite in western Jerusalem. These efforts come in the framework of a series of steps taken by Muslim organizations and the Awqaf Institute to maintain the identity of the historical gravesite, but the Israeli government continues to confiscate large parts of it. The Israeli government did not pay much attention to the Arabic names on these graves or to the relatives of the dead buried there. Israel has transformed a large part of Minila cemetery into a public park after it occupied West Jerusalem. The cemetery used to have 200 acres, but now it only has 10. The Hebrew state continues to confiscate parts of the cemetery to make space for other construction projects.
My mother and her grandfather were buried here. Salal al-Jaoni and his son Rateb were also buried here. Their grandsons are now living in Saudi Arabia.
The Minila cemetery dates back before Christ. According to historical records, it was managed by King Solomon. A very long time after that, the Crusaders buried more than 70 skulls of Muslims they killed during their occupation of the city. Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi ordered that all the bodies of all those martyred in the battles with the Crusaders be buried in the same cemetery. The gravesite was thus transformed into a resting place for senior imams and religious scholars.
والعلماء والفقهاء.
هذه القضية بدأت تحمل.
There is a strong dispute over this matter. At one end of this conflict, there are some American and Israeli institutions who insist on violating and desecrating this cemetery. They want to remove all signs of our cultural, historical, and religious rights from the cemetery, using their power of weapons and money.
التاريخي والحضاري والديني منها بقوة السلاح وبقوة المال الذي يملكونه.
The last time the Israeli government confiscated an area that belongs to the cemetery, it claimed that the space is needed to build the Museum of Forgiveness, which will be built on a large area of the gravesite. Muslim organizations will submit a petition to the Israeli Superior Court, which in turn will decide whether or not the construction will be stopped for 1 month. Muslim leaders are still not very optimistic that the cemetery will be spared. They have been exerting all their efforts to maintain the Islamic and Arab identity of the cemetery.
They are digging the graves and putting the remains in boxes, but we do not know what they will do with them. The dignity of human beings, dead and alive, is being violated.
Israel has been trying to change the identities of many historic and holy places like this gravesite. Meanwhile, Arab countries do nothing more than condemn it.
شيرين يونس، قناة أبو ظبي من أرض مقبرة مأمن الله.
كشفت صحيفة واشنطن بوست.
The Washington Post reported that the American occupying army in Iraq intentionally exaggerated Abu Musab al-Zarqawi's role in armed attacks on Iraqis to justify continuing the occupation. The newspaper added that U.S. military sources said the aim of this exaggeration was to link al-Qaeda with the war in Iraq. Washington also accused al-Qaeda of being responsible for the 9/11 attacks.
عن التضخيم المتعمد الذي قامت به قوات الاحتلال الأمريكي في العراق لدور المدعو أبو مصعب.
The deliberate propaganda campaign conducted by the U.S. occupation forces in Iraq, exaggerating the role played by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi in armed attacks, was done to justify prolonging the occupation.
نقلا عن وثائق داخلية للجيش الأمريكي إلى الأذهان استخدام قادة جيش الاحتلال الإعلام.
Iraqis are remembering the events of the last 3 years of occupation. According to the Washington Post, some U.S. military intelligence officials believe that the U.S. Army in Iraq used Iraqi and other media for the last 2 years to emphasize al-Zarqawi's role in terrorist attacks against Iraqis. The newspaper said that one of Washington's goals in its campaign was to create in the minds of the American public a certain image of al-Qaeda, which is accused of orchestrating the 9/11 attacks and to justify continuing and financing the war on Iraq and its occupation. On the other hand, the latest incidents have shown Iraqi citizens that the occupation does not want security and stability for them since the fall of the regime that was once supported by the West for 3 decades. Justifications for the occupation have fallen along with some of the illusions and scenarios created by the occupation, such as that of Musab al-Zarqawi. This also brings to mind the acquiescence of the occupation to the election results after being pressured by Iraqi citizens who chose a religious figure such as Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani to represent them. The occupation was afraid that forming an Iraqi government and maintaining security would mean its withdrawal from the country. The United Iraqi Alliance's victory in the elections and the absence of any political figures that agree with American policies, such as Iyad Alawi, who has a history in the Ba'ath Party, and with Western intelligence agencies, came as a shock to the occupation, a shock that was translated into attacks against Iraqi civilians and police forces to pressure and to weaken the government of Ibrahim al-Jafri. This in turn would prepare the platform for secular elements that are more in line with American policies. After the last elections made clear that Washington interferes in Iraq's political life, U.S. Ambassador to Iraq Zalmay Khalilzad accused al-Jafri of sectarianism. The accusation was followed by a terrorist attack in the Samarra, in addition to operations targeting holy sites of Shiites and Sunnis to create sectarian strife. Sources close to the Iraqi government said that U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and her British counterpart Jack Straw made an explicit request to al-Jafri to abstain from nominating himself for the presidency. Al-Jafri denied the request, warning that this would lead to the disintegration of democracy and constitute a throwback to dictatorship in Iraq. The 3rd anniversary of the occupation also brings to mind not only U.S. President George Bush's announcement within a month of Saddam's fall that Iraq had become a field from which to combat terrorism through military operations, but also al-Zarqawi's appearance on the scene shortly after the announcement.
وبعد شهر من سقوط نظام صدام بأن العراق أصبح ساحة لمواجهة الإرهاب وانطلاق العمليات المسلحة وظهور الزرقاوي بعد فترة من هذا الإعلان.
The Kurdish Democratic Society Party demanded the ruling Justice and Development Party in Turkey to define terrorism after the Turkish party made it a condition that the Kurdistan Workers' Party be classified as a terrorist organization before party leader Erdogan would agree to meet with Kurdish leader Ahmed Turk to find ways to contain the rising tension between the Kurds and the Turkish security forces.
While funeral processions are being held for victims of violence, including Kurdish civilians and fighters, as well as Turkish security men, a state of national and political conflict continues to escalate, especially after the European Union criticized both the Turkish government and the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan's rejection of the European Union's criticism regarding Turkey's use of force to solve the Kurdish problem, as well as his refusal to meet with Kurdish Democratic Society Party leader Ahmed Turk, point to the difficulty in finding a diplomatic solution to the conflict. This came after Erdogan demanded that Ahmed Turk agree to declare the Kurdistan Workers' Party a terrorist organization.
Halkın bir siyasi partinin lideri
He must first recognize the Kurdistan Workers' Party as a terrorist party. Then they can request a meeting.
The Democratic Society Party, which has the constitutional and political right to meet with the Turkish Prime Minister, demanded for its part a definition for terrorism before condemning the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which it considers a reality that must be accepted if the Turkish government is serious about finding a peaceful solution to the conflict.
The Kurdistan Workers' Party is a reality. The Kurdish problem, therefore, cannot be solved without it. This is the difference between us and the other parties that want a solution that ignores reality. There needs to be more dialogue to find an acceptable solution.
When Turkish opposition parties unanimously refused to meet with the Democratic Society Party, the situation was further complicated.
Why doesn't the Democratic Society condemn the Kurdistan Workers' Organization? They want us to accept them as a political partner and to cooperate with them to solve the problem without condemning their terrorist acts. We refuse this entirely.
Erdogan's condition before meeting with the Democratic Society Party leader and his demand from Turkish parties to close down the official representative of the Kurds is a sign that his government is not serious about finding a peaceful solution to the Kurdish problem, which army generals would prefer to solve militarily.
President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad told residents in Mashhad on Monday the enemy fails in its attempts to mobilize its economic and political facilities to strike a blow to Iran and throw up obstacles in its way to secure progress.
President Ahmadinejad said the enemy scrambles to launch psychological warfare intended to drive a wedge among the ranks of Iranians, but that their unholy objectives will lead nowhere. He meanwhile reassured people of Mashhad that his government will do its best to serve the nation.
که دولت خادم و خدمتگزار شما
Be sure that the government chosen by you to serve you will meet the nation's demand in a way that suits the nation's dignity, and will do this by wisdom and strength, and will not retreat even an inch from the nation's path.
Ahmadinejad went on to say that following the path of the great prophet will help Iran win further headway on national and international stage alike. The president also said his cabinet tries its utmost to beat unemployment and create more jobs.
The plane carrying Parliament Speaker Ghulam Ali Haddad Adel and his accompanying delegation bound for Istanbul, Turkey, landed in Mirabat International Airport immediately after takeoff on Monday. Officials said a technical failure in the aircraft's landing gear was to blame for the cancellation of the trip. Haddad Adel, who was due to attend an OIC summit of the parliament speakers in Turkey, told reporters after touchdown the plane suffered partial technical malfunction. The airliner could continue its way and literally make a safe landing in Istanbul, though. He also said he would leave for Turkey once the problem was fixed. Iran says it is ready to sign a non-invasion treaty with the Persian Gulf littoral states.
Speaking to reporters, Iranian Defense Minister Brigadier General Mustafa Mohammad Najjar said Tehran is well prepared to launch joint war games with countries rimming the Persian Gulf to remove any misunderstanding. He went on to say the Great Prophet war game aimed at dispatching a message of peace and goodwill to the regional countries, adding naming the maneuver as the Prophet brought the light to the Muslim world. Brigadier Najjar underlined the war game triggered concern among enemies of the Islamic establishment. Hence, they kicked up the fuss against Iran.
Iraqi President Jalal Talabani says the forthcoming Iran-U.S. talks will also be attended by a handful of representatives from Iraq and the chairman of the Supreme Council for the Islamic Revolution in Iraq, Abdulaziz al-Hakim.
Talabani also said the negotiations are taking place to end the scattered meddling by third parties in the internal affairs of the war-shattered country. Meanwhile, the Iraqi government has strongly castigated recent remarks made by Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, who earlier spoke of a start of a civil war in Iraq. Prime Minister Ibrahim Jafari said the remarks have brought up fierce reaction by all sectors of Iraqi life and the government as well.
Kuwaiti Minister of Planning and Administrative Affairs, Dr. Masuma Mubarak, is the first woman to assume a ministerial post in Kuwait. Mubarak, a professor of international relations at the University of Kuwait, became minister 1 month after Kuwaiti women were granted full political rights last year. Mubarak tells about her experience in government and the challenges she has faced.
Kuwaiti Minister of Planning and Administrative Affairs, Dr. Masuma Mubarak, said the road to government was not easy. She said the march started in 1971 when women were calling for the achievement of full political rights because the Kuwaiti constitution grants Kuwaiti women equal rights to men. However, the electoral law had acted against women because Article 1 required electors to be males only.
We started since then up until 2005. Then the decision was made through the parliament to grant Kuwaiti women her full political right, election and also running to be elected. And then this was the breakthrough, and fortunately Kuwaiti leadership was ready to implement such change by appointing 2 ladies in the municipality council, and then the first Kuwaiti minister, which is me, as the first minister in Kuwait.
Mubarak said working in a male-dominated environment was not easy, but she believed in herself and made others believe in her.
First of all, I have to believe in myself. I have to believe in my skills. Then I let them to be also believe in me. And this is really what happened also in the cabinet of ministers, because when I entered the first time, definitely I had the doubt how they would perceive me, but as long I perceive them as professionals, they did also for me.
The Kuwaiti minister added that gender balance in her country was improving despite the drawbacks.
In last August, my 2nd month in the cabinet of minister, I succeeded with the cooperation of my colleagues and with the support of His Excellency the Prime Minister of Kuwait. Now he is the Emir of Kuwait, to change one of the most important gender discrimination in the employment law.
Mubarak says that women's political participation will not only be in form, but also in fact, and women will be able to make a difference.
Lots of those who were against women political rights, and even those who were pro-women political rights, they were hesitating, and also they were scaring others that women will never be able to face the crowd, will not able to go for election and to run a campaign, but thanks goodness they were not right, because last, let me say, in 4th of April this month, 4th of April, we had the municipality council election, and 2 ladies, for the first time in Kuwait history, 2 ladies ran for elections, and for the first time women also voted in that election.
Mubarak stressed that women's participation could serve the country as any other citizen.
We all are the citizen of the country. We all seek the best for our people and our country. We all seek the right participation. So I can't see really any differences between women participation and men participation in that regard.
The Kuwaiti minister said the main participation, however, would be in the July 2007 elections, and that she was working not only for women to achieve seats in parliament, but also to stand up to the challenges she and other women would face.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin. This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. For a transcript of this program, to watch streaming video, or for instructions on how to receive Link TV in the United States, visit linktv.org.